And without further ado, let's go straight over to my first guest, political and social commentator James Melville. Afternoon, James.
Good afternoon, Kevin. You well?
I'm very well. Now, there's a lot of domestic business that I have to clear up with you, but before we get to that, I do think that arguably the biggest story in the world right now is that devastating attack on the Crimea bridge, the only bridge linking Russia to Crimea. It's Putin's showcase bridge. He only opened it, a railway and road, in 2018. He said it was indestructible, it was security proof. Clearly isn't. Many believe, and I tend to agree, that this is a Ukrainian attack. And the question is, will a furious Putin wreak revenge by pressing the nuclear button? I mean, this is an escalation, isn't it?
It is. It's worrying. I mean, if you look at it's not just this, it's obviously the pipeline in terms of Nord Stream as well. I mean, Putin's getting boxed in a bit. And one of the fundamental aspects of this conflict is obviously about energy supply, not just within the Ukraine, but also the knock-on effects across Europe. So that's kind of a double hammer there now as well. And so that's the great unknown. What does Putin do next? I mean, my concern is obviously escalation, where that takes us, not just in the Ukraine, but possibly other neighbouring states as well. But it's also about what the right information. My view is that basically there needs to be a point at some point in any conflict where they sit around the table and find a way to negotiation and try and de-escalate. But we don't know where Putin's going with. That is the great unknown. It's been that way right since the start of the conflict. We don't know what his next move's going to be.
Yeah, as I say, I think it overshadows everything else. This is a very precarious position the world is in now. And, of course, you've got Biden talking about potential Armageddon. I mean, this is terrifying. But we'll leave that one hanging there. And let's return to domestic affairs. I want to talk to you, James, about one of the big rows, if you like, of the week. It's about the nanny state. Jacob Rees-Mogg, of all people, was about to unleash on an unsuspecting nation a £15 million campaign telling us how to conserve energy. Turn your radiators down, don't have the central heating on all week. Liz Truss, and I'm with her all the way on this, she basically said, no, we're not a nanny state. We don't tell grown-ups how to run their lives. And she's nixed it. She's said it's not going to happen. And now loads of furious Tories say, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. We don't need adverts to tell us how to conserve energy, do we? We're adults.
Yeah, completely. But, if the government were right in their messaging right at the start of this, then perhaps we wouldn't need to be wasting a fortune of taxpayers' money on stating the bleeding obvious. I mean, the government got muddled up about basically the energy cap. They weren't clear about basically what that involved. They were getting muddled up, and so it involved people like Martin Lewis and various other individuals to point out about the unit cap. But there is an element where people just need to have a component of common sense, as most people do, where basically you turn the dial down on certain things. You conserve energy where you can, especially if the bills are going north. We as individuals should be able to work that out. And businesses, more importantly, are facing a bigger problem that despite the energy cap, they're going to have to make some pretty savage choices over this winter to just stay afloat. They're the main concerns, not wasting millions and millions in yet another public information campaign that states the obvious. And there's also the other aspect, there's another campaign that's rumbling on at the moment about telling people just to basically cheer up a little bit when they go back to work on Monday.
Yeah, the Sunday scaries. I mean, the government is actually going to launch a campaign to help young people cope with what they call the Sunday scaries. And this is on a Sunday, they all get depressed and horrified because tomorrow they have to go to work. The government is going to spend money trying to help people with the Sunday scaries. Please, I mean, do these people, this government, do they not understand what conservatism is all about? It's about small government. It's about respecting people as individuals, as grown-ups who can make their own decisions. And it isn't about interfering in our lives with this kind of nanny state nonsense.
Yeah, moping around on a Sunday, it used to be called a hangover, didn't it?
Yeah, well, in my case, yes.
Yeah, probably mine as well. I mean, people obviously will think, well, we've got to go back to work on Monday. I'd rather have Saturday and Sunday with it, but life doesn't work like that. People have to pay the bills. It's just lunacy. I think one of the problems is that we've gotten to entrapment by government, not just this government, but previous governments as well, where they're basically telling us from every nook and cranny of our lives how to live our lives by stating the obvious. And actually, a lot of the stuff through the COVID restrictions were a bit like that as well. There's a lot of bonkers rules that didn't make sense, a lot of campaigns that really shouldn't have been put in place. And I think the total spend in terms of government funding was pretty close to, of advertising campaigns, was pretty close to about 500 million over that period. And still we're going through the same thing. I think what I want from government, like most people, is maybe less government, but more decent policies and better communication rather than wasting money on telling us what we should already know.
As Ronald Reagan once famously said, the most terrifying sentence in the English language is, "I'm from the government, I'm here to help." I stuck something similar on Twitter this week and somebody came back and said, "Don't you want any advice or information from the government?" I said, "No." There you go. That's where I stand. I don't want any advice, any help about my life from the government because I'm vaguely grown up. I'm vaguely an adult. I can handle these things myself. Mother government could do one and stick out of my life. But nevertheless, of course, the Labour Party, all the socialists, they love all this stuff. They love getting involved in everybody's life, telling them what to do and what not to do. So they're going, this is a disgrace that they've abandoned this information campaign about energy conservation. But worse than that, you'd expect, because that's what socialists and Labour parties do. They want to run every aspect of your life for the good of the community. Never mind the individual. It's the state that matters. What a load of rubbish that is. But what worries me, James, is that many people in the Tory party are rebelling against Liz Truss saying no nanny statism. Don't they understand what it is to be a Conservative?
I think the ideological debate has moved on. It's not about left versus right anymore. I've always considered myself slightly left of centre. But I feel, for instance, like that I haven't left the left, but the left has left me. And I think a lot of maybe slightly right of centre Conservatives now feel that basically they're still Conservatives, but conservatism seems to have left them, in particular government. So we've now got a battle that seems to be about an ideology of big state authoritarianism, where they tell us, or basically survey what we have to do on every aspect of our lives, versus a form of classical liberalism, possibly libertarianism, where people want effective governments. They want government to take care of those who need it most. They want the opportunity for basically the country to flourish with enterprise and opportunity and good schools and hospitals. You know, the basics, which are not, the governments aren't doing any of that stuff. And instead what they're doing is getting involved in petty bureaucracy and effectively micromanagement of citizens. And I do not think most people in the country want that. People want the government to take care of them, but at the same time, being part of a government taking care of society is giving the opportunity for people in society to flourish and not be told what to do on every single aspect of their lives.
Yes, stick out of our lives. We can make these decisions ourselves. Thanks very much. Another kind of philosophical situation arose this week. Conor Burns, the Trade Minister, instantly fired from that position. Still an MP, but he's had the Tory party whip unceremoniously removed from him after an alleged incident at the Tory conference where allegedly, he denies this, he denies he's done anything wrong, but he touched a young man's thigh in the bar. Now, the point about this is I don't know whether he did this or not. Frankly, I hadn't really been all that aware of his very existence before this. But people say, well, what happened to the principle of innocent until proved guilty? I mean, this guy, the government, or Liz Truss, has come down on him like a ton of bricks, as I say. Instantly sacked from being Trade Minister, instantly has the Tory party whip removed from him, and this is just on the basis of an accusation that has not been proved. So what happened to the principle of innocent until you're proved guilty? And basically, this seems to be a situation where you're innocent until you're accused of anything. That's kind of wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, it is wrong. And I think if you look at some of the misdemeanors in terms of policy or scandals that were proven over the last, not just the last 2 or 3 years, but indefinitely in governments, you know, I think there's certain ministers who survive far too long. This is the other way around. I don't think it's right. But nor do I think that he should be getting a knighthood right now either. I think what needs to happen is he has to have the opportunity to clear his name, prove his innocence, but the dust needs to settle on the story before decisions are made. I'm uncomfortable about this because I don't think we should be sort of hiring and firing, giving rewards or punishing people when there's effectively sort of an allegation that's out there, but nothing proven at the current time. So I don't think we should be going down the route of almost witch hunting politicians when it's far from clear at this stage.
Yeah, exactly right. This is the era. This is the age of the accusation. Accusations in this day and age, for some reason, don't need to be proved. Once you make that accusation, usually the person who you make allegations against is finished. We've got to get back, haven't we, to one of the basic premises of justice in this country. You are innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, but it's muddying the waters all over the place, Kevin. And we know all this stuff about in terms of this amplification of everything. A politician basically, you look grimaces in a photo, that's the picture that's plastered all over media and social media. Every single word is overanalyzed. People are smeared and tarnished before the dust is settled on any allegation. Everything is amplified, and that is it's a nature of the world because we've got 24/7 media, the social media and so on, and then everyone picks a side. Everyone forms an opinion on people before anything is resolved. Good people are smeared unfairly. Bad people sometimes wriggle away from any accusation and stay in positions or get promoted when they shouldn't. And it causes a sort of a feeding frenzy, when actually what should happen is everyone should literally let, on a case-by-case basis, the story evolve and basically an understanding of what actually happened before any decisions are made. And it goes back to government. With government at the moment, they are making impulsive decisions rather than basically doing a sensible thing and taking stock and going, we're basically going to back this guy, support him until proven otherwise.
Yeah, you would have thought after the couple of weeks that Liz Truss has had that she may have been slightly reticent to rush to judgment about anything, because half the problem with the mini budget was I don't think she sat around and thought about it too long, nor did Kwasi Kwarteng. So perhaps she should slow down her thought process because it's getting her in trouble.
Yeah, but we're getting governments that are run by focus groups and bombastic headlines and the sort of mentality of the mob to basically change things. I mean, that can work quite well if there's a campaign that cuts through and actually makes a difference to people's lives, but it doesn't work well when a government seems to be more concerned about the immediate judgment sometimes on issues that haven't had time to be resolved. That even actually applies to our mini budget. I mean, I was no fan of aspects of that mini budget, but the fact that they U-turn literally the first sign doesn't bode well.
The U-turn was their massive mistake. James, to return to Liz Truss's many troubles, good stories today in the papers, particularly in the Mail on Sunday, all about Michael Gove, who, of course, was sacked from the cabinet by the new Prime Minister, who is apparently behind the scenes doing what's described as sadistically destroying Truss's regime. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. You know what he's like. Apparently, she had a meeting with him before the Tory conference where she was going to offer him what was described as a top job in the Middle East. In other words, she had plans to get him out of the picture, get rid of him. He's having none of it. And if you got Michael Gove peeing outside the tent, frankly, it's not a good situation. That guy can do damage.
Oh, he's got form on this. Yeah. I mean, he's one thing we know about Michael Gove. I think his legacy is a man constantly on some form of manoeuvrings.
Yes, that's right.
And plottings. I mean, it goes back to Boris. I mean, it's like success. I mean, there's Theresa May even as well. I mean, it's just individual prime ministers think, oh, God, he won't go away. And so what do we do with him? How do we stop this? And so, it's probably better inside the tent in some way, know your enemy and all of that stuff. But it's like Christmas comes around once a year, and Michael Gove plotting comes around every 3 months as a story. Yeah. And it's the same thing. And if she wants to stamp her authority on this, and the clock is ticking based on the poor start, she needs to ignore some of the blowback in the media. She needs to ignore stories like that. She needs to be meeting Michael Gove. She needs to basically plough her own furrow and form her own opinions, her own advisors, and a clear ideology both in terms of right solutions, short-term and long-term, and actually just have a thicker skin.
Yeah.
You know, the prime ministers that seem to be the ones that do well, the ones people look at them, either whether they agree with them or not, think, do you know what, this person has a strength of character. They've got a vision, and they're ignoring the brickbats elsewhere. But based on the first month, Truss is falling into the same trap. She's getting blindsided by negative forces around her.
I think that the 45p tax rate that they were going to abolish and then they U-turned, I mean, that was not great politics because the optics on that are good. It doesn't really matter. It was worth 2 billion quid. However, it doesn't look good. It looks like the Tories looking after the rich and not the poor. However, that's what they declared in their mini budget, and there was a big rebellion from these con-socialists in the Conservative Party who don't understand what conservatism is. Anyway, she buckled, and so did Kwasi Kwarteng, and I think that was her big mistake, because now she's got rebellions on everything she does, because the Tory MPs, who are notoriously a difficult lot, they sense that anything she does, if they rebel and say you can't do that, she'll change her mind. So, you know, she changed her mind on the 45p tax rate. She is now being urged to change her mind on this nanny state claptrap. You know, she's got no authority whatsoever, has she?
There's normally a honeymoon period. But there's just, you know, there's not been none of that. I mean, it's about a week. And so now we're into sort of nightmare territory, which is kind of reminiscent. Do you remember back to after Major won the election, and then there was obviously Black Wednesday from that moment onwards? And that was pretty early on in terms of that cycle of government. That was a government on the skids, and they ended up getting wiped out, obviously, in the 1997 election. I think there's parallels here now. Truss is going to struggle to get this, but I do think the country, for a number of different reasons, going back before her, including Partygate and Johnson and so on, where the country have fallen, not that they were in love before, but they basically got bored and fed up with this government. They don't trust this government, and I think it's run its course. And I think, you know, the opposition are hardly ideal, but all Starmer needs to do is basically keep his mouth shut, rub his hands in glee, and just watch effectively the government destroy themselves. I think, looking at the opinion polls, and the clock is ticking, I think this government pretty much is done.
I mean, Starmer makes a lot of mistakes, but what he has worked out is when your enemy is making mistakes, don't interrupt them. And that's his approach, and it's working, I'm afraid. But just before you go, a couple more minutes, James. This business of attritional politics, you know, this kind of factionalism, you know, one tribe against another. Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said today, I detest the Tories, in a BBC interview. She made the comment to Laura Kunsberg on her Rubbish News Sunday morning show. Cabinet Minister Nadhim Zahawi told the programme that her language was dangerous. I don't know if it's dangerous, but it's kind of pathetic, isn't it? It's like school playground language.
Well, this is politics. I mean, I'm jaded with the standard of politicians as much as you are and millions of other people. It's always been tribal. I mean, that's always been there, but it seems to be sort of petty tribalism right now. And, you know, it seems to be within this vortex now that if one person disagrees with someone on one view, despite agreeing on everything else, that's it. They have to be purged. And it's happening with our politicians as well. You know, wouldn't it be much better to have a rigorous debate and then a wry smile and go, we disagree on this one, but we're going to find some common ground elsewhere? But that bad example of not happening and petty tribalism set by our political leaders, they're point scoring over ridiculous things. And we just don't have the class of politicians who go, okay, you've got a different opinion. I'm going to learn from some of that. We're going to have a rigorous debate and hopefully both learn from this and try and make the world a better place. Now it's just tribalism for the sake of tribalism and point scoring on absolutely everything.
And to go back to the Tories, the Tory government and Liz Truss's regime, I mean, when long-standing governments fall apart, it is usually amid a lot of infighting within the party. And that's what's going on now. I mean, the Tories are far more interested in bickering with each other than running this country in a sensible way, aren't they?
Yeah, there's an element of denial because they're just basically purging themselves because they're 30 points behind in the polls. But I think fundamentally, we can go on about Partygate and squabbles with the party, but the reason the Tories are struggling most of all is because of the state of the economy. It's always that way, and it's going to get worse. And the clock is ticking. By the time we get to, say, 2024, the economy is still going to be a pretty bad place. And history has taught us that governments, long-term governments in particular, do not win elections when the economy is going south. And considering a lot of the aspects to our economic carnage right now have been caused by the government. They've either taken their hands off the wheel on certain issues, they've ignored certain issues, or they've just come up with some dumb policies. But I think we've now had a government for, 12 years. I think the public have run out of steam with this government. They've run out of steam with this government in terms of ideas. They're looking at something else. They're not particularly impressed by Labour, but they're going, well, they can't be as bad as the current lot. We might as well just give them a shot at power and see what they come up with. I'm not convinced that Starmer is going to be much better as a Prime Minister, but he can't be anything worse than we've got at the moment. We've got a government that's literally at the fag-end existence of a 12-year cycle. And I think the public know this, and I think actually the Tory MPs know this as well.
And there's the, to close on, there's the possibility, or the very real possibility, that two things could happen this winter that traditionally destroy governments. In fact, one of them destroyed Major's government. That is people losing their houses because they can't afford their mortgages. And the other one is if the lights go out, power cuts. These are the big destroyers of governments, and let's face it, it's a very real prospect for this government. So tough times ahead for Liz Truss. An excellent half an hour with you, James. Thank you so much once again. That's James Melville, political and social commentator.